Hey everyone, how you doing? All right. I know it's been a while since I've done a video, and it's probably going to be a terrible video because I'm out of practice at this point. But I had this awful um, night terror, I guess you would call it. I don't think it was a dream, really. Oh, a nightmare. So I don't think it was like a traditional nightmare. It felt like way more than that, and it was really, really scary and it was painful, and so I'll just call it a night terror. Vision, I don't know. It was something. It wasn't just a dream. I can tell you that for sure. It absolutely wasn't a dream. And it kind of ties in with this book that I've been reading. This struggle for virtue. It's like ascetism in a modern secular society. So a modern bad society. But it's excellent. I wish I could have met this guy. Archbishop Averky Talshev. I'm probably butchering that name, so I apologize. But it's an excellent book so far. I really enjoyed it. And it ties into this nightmare story. I assure you, I know my mind is a little crazy the way it works, but it'll all tie together eventually. So I had this horrible night terror. Um, and this is after I started reading this, right? This book about ascetism, which I wasn't honestly familiar with at all. I didn't even know what the term meant. But apparently, like, I guess the common meaning of it is like struggle. So you're basically struggling to be virtuous because in this human state, we're in a fallen world, we're in a fallen state. Um, we're incarnate in these bodies, living in a place where bad things happen. So essentially, what he's saying, and granted, I'm not all the way through it, right? I'm only halfway through it, and it's been very strange the way I'm reading it and the way I'm connecting with it. And normally, I'll highlight the way I work is like I'll do like the highlight blue if I agree with that. The strike throughs are things that I think are wrong or I just don't agree with one or the other. And then the asterisks, I scribble all over it. But for whatever reason, this book I'm really, really connecting to because I think it goes back to almost like monasticism, nuns, monks, things like that. They separate themselves. They don't want to be anything like the world, which, given the current condition of this place, is understandable. But I don't know. I'm very, very much connecting to this book, and I'll definitely finish it, absolutely. And then I'll probably read it a few more times because I'm not grasping everything because I'm going through it so fast. It's like my eyes are being ripped open. I don't know. It's weird. You're like reading something. It's like you've read it before, or for whatever reason, something in you is like, this is correct. So this is, there's something good here. So I've been reading that. So that's part of it. And you know how monks are, right? They separate themselves from society. Some of them, they shun personal possessions, either all possessions or some possessions. They're celibate. They give up sex. Some of them, they don't eat spicy food. They don't eat, foods with sugar in them. They struggle. So it's like he says, right? They call it the virtue, the struggle for virtue. So that's what they're doing is at least he says, they admit that we're fallen human beings. We're in a fallen state, in a fallen world. And because of that, we act like, paraphrasing a little bit, you definitely go read it for yourself. He's passed on already. So there's nothing commercial involved here. He's not going to get the money. So I don't feel bad about it. I don't usually go out and promote books like that, but like I said, I like this one. And they shun everything. So they basically, it's such a weird concept. Like you put yourself in an uncomfortable position on purpose. And from what I gather from what he's saying, and I'll read more later, maybe do another video once I complete it and actually fully understand it. But he's trying to get back to the purest sense of who we're supposed to be, which is a soul, spirit. They go into different levels. I like try to keep it simple and just consider it a soul and a body, like a soul incarnate in a body going through this experience here that we're all experiencing. But essentially, he speaks like the spirit is the purest form of you. It's like the pure, godliest form of you. And its only want is to get back to God. So your spirit is pure and holy, or at least used to be, and it wants to get back, or it's striving to be, one or the other, but it's striving to be pure and holy and get back to God. That's your soul's purpose is to get back to God. And unfortunately, we're incarnate in human bodies, and from what he says, we essentially operate like animals. I love animals. They're part of creation. I will always support them. Animals are different than we are. Some of us act just like animals. And his position, I think, in ascetics in general, is that we act like human animals or humanimals. That's essentially how we act. So, we kind of concern ourselves with things that animals would, right? Procreation and food and things that we need, right? Or we think that we need. Like, he considers them lower level thoughts. So those are like low level things that you think about, that you concern yourselves with. Like, it's humans, right? We're worried about, possessions and sex and food and all this stuff, like lower level things. And we negate like the higher spiritual or soul level things, which are being holy and getting back to God. So that's like the highest purpose we have, is to become holy, sanctified, pure, and get back to God, right? In heaven. So to be as pure and as holy as we can get, almost perfect, holy and perfect, so we can get back to God. That's essentially our purpose. That's our soul's purpose of being here in this fallen place where horrible things are allowed to happen, and people do horrible things all the time. I think that's the crux of what he's saying. So that goes back to them putting themselves in uncomfortable positions on purpose. They do it on purpose, which is it's really strange. But it makes sense, and it ties into the story. I'll go back to the nightmare. But it ties into it because, like I said, they're monks. They shun possessions and probably property and sex and food, to a degree, and water. Some of them, they do the dry fasting, which I'm doing right now. But they shun everything. So they shun everything that is this. Everything that is their body. They don't worry about their vanity, about haircuts and nails and makeup and fancy clothing and watches and cars. They shun everything. They literally, it seems like, I'm no expert, I'm working on it, I'm going to have to read that a few times to truly understand it. But they shun everything that is a lower level concern, things that a human or an animal would concern themselves with. So like animals, they get up and they're like, wow, I'm hungry. I want to go eat something. I want to drink something. I want to go find something to mount. They're worried about procreation. They're worried about lower level things. And from what I gather so far, after halfway reading the book, is that, they separate themselves and they try to do away with worldly things. Just like Jesus said, right? And the apostles, everyone else, like, forget this world. Not entirely. We need to take care of ourselves while we're here. But understand that the goal, right? The purpose, while we're here, why I'm here is a little different. But while we're here, and I'm part of it too, right? As I'll explain in the story, I'm on the same journey you are. So we're trying to become holy. Right? We're trying to become pure and sanctified so that we can get back to God, right? Fallen, but we're trying to be holy in this place, this little test environment, if you will, to get holy enough to go back to God full time, right? To heaven. That's the goal. But what we concern ourselves with so much are the lower level things that animals concern themselves with. And I'm not trying to knock animals. I love animals. I'm a vegan. I'll never harm them on purpose. I don't kill ants. I don't kill roaches, anything, right? I live in harmony with God's creation. God created this place for us because I guess we're not holy enough to go home. We're not allowed, the door's locked, to us currently because I guess we're not holy enough. And, when we get holy enough, hopefully we can go home. But here we are. So those are lower level thoughts, and that's why they kind of segregate themselves and they put themselves in discomfort. Like right now, it's the 12th, so I haven't ate or drank anything in like a day and a half, which is fine. The fasting part, I can get through that. I've done 40 days, so, but it's not comfortable. I still want to go eat. I still want to have snacks, I could still drink water. I'm not dying of thirst or anything, but I could still drink water, of course. And the dry fasting, that can be extreme for some people. And I tried it. I don't think you can go 40 days dry fasting. That's pretty crazy. I think the body needs some water. Water restriction temporarily, sure, I'll do it. I have no problem, being uncomfortable and trying to, I don't know, throw off the lower level wants that an animal or a human would interest themselves with daily. And unlike animals, like, we're even worse. Like, we're out there chasing materialism and greed and objects like that. So it's even worse than just the animals. The animals, they're not doing anything wrong. They don't know any better. They're concerning themselves with what they should be concerned with. Aside from like the procreation side of the house, which they don't know any better. It's not their fault. They're not doing anything wrong, And some of their mating practices are very aggressive and they don't look voluntary. Kind of like humans. Like, I'm not laughing, sorry, but, humans, we're sinful beasts. We go out and we rape and we pillage and steal and kill and we do horrible things. It's probably why we're not in heaven right now, because we're not really holy enough to be there, to be quite honest. Hopefully we will get there, and hopefully, eventually we'll go home. But until then, we'll have to figure out how to become sanctified. And when we're all, on this journey, I'm on it too. Trust me, I'm on a journey of my own. I'm trying to get holy, perfect, perfectly holy. That's the game plan. And that's what I think ascetism, I think that's what it helps, because it keeps you from worrying about the little things, like the little snacks you should be eating, or the sugar and the sweet, the pleasant things in life, the pleasantries, the overabundance of possessions, the sweets, food and water restriction if you're fasting, because you're trying to get into like more of a spiritual state so you can connect with God more. It makes sense. And I don't know why, but it just clicked with me. And that's the first time reading about it, like ascetism. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I hope I am. But apparently it ties back to very, very old ancient traditions. This goes back thousands of years. This isn't like the Christianity we have today, where, they get together and they sing songs, and they mention a few things from the Bible, and then they go out to, a barbecue out in the parking lot, and they're walking in church in like skirts and showing off all kinds of stuff. Like, Christianity today, at least in the United States, is, I don't think that's anything close to what Jesus had planned. And no one in there looks like an apostle. The apostles, I don't think they had a ton of money. They didn't have many possessions. They kind of roamed around a bit. They didn't concern themselves with things of this world. They weren't really worried about like the worldly stuff. They were more concerned with saving souls. So, explaining what Jesus did, how it tied into the Old Testament. They tied back into the Old Testament, but he was a New Testament, and he was, quite frankly, he was God on earth, to be quite honest. The Christ. That's what it is. In human form. Let's be clear, right? There's a Trinity, and obviously God is at the top, right? Holy Spirit, Christ, and God. So God is at the top. So even though God comes down to incarnate into a body, into a flawed human body, at least this time, it's a different story, right? It's a New Testament. So even though God does incarnate, doesn't come down here with every answer in the world. It's like some omnipotent God that knows everything and can see like thousands of years into the future and all this. That's not what happens here, especially this situation, which you're seeing unfold in front of your eyes. So you judge for yourself. But I'm telling you, that's not how it's working. So, Emmanuel, God with us, but not God, not the top of the triangle, not the God that we can't see. It's not that one. But still, God would have planned this out ahead of time. So that's the crazy part that I'm trying to wrap my head around. Like, God would have planned this ahead of time and then incarnated into a body, into a flawed human animal, if you will. I say that in the nicest way possible. And then has to like figure this out, through scripture, through Bible reading, through things that everyone does. Not coming down here with some like omnipotent, godly, knowledge that I can just throw out there. I have every answer in the book. That's not how this is working. And you see how my brain works. I'm all over the place. So let's try to get back to the story here. But ascetism, like they try to throw off everything, all the worldly stuff. They don't want to be of this world. Just like Jesus didn't want to be of this world. And the apostles and John the Baptist out in the woods didn't want to be in this world. And speaking of the woods, like, this video is terrible, isn't it? So I went out in the woods. My mom hadn't been up to Virginia in like 20 years. She hadn't seen her brother, which I think is ridiculous. Family's important. So we went up there. I'll get back to the story, I promise, eventually. But we go up there. This ties back to John the Baptist, just to be clear. So we go up there in the mountains, and something in me, like we got up in the mountains in those woods, and something in me just wants to be there. I love being in the woods. I love mountains. I love nature and trees and the birds and the wildlife and the deer and just everything. It was awesome. We were out at this little like ranch on top of a hill, and it was overlooking like this valley in Paint Lick, Virginia. That's where it was. So it was Paint Lick, and my mother's from Lebanon, Virginia. So we went over to Lebanon. We still got land up there, actually, a little tiny patch of land. It's not much, like 15 acres or 20 acres, something like that. But it's where my grandma used to live. So Lebanon is close to Paint Lick, and Paint Lick is close to, where is Dana from? It's like Cedar Bluff and Richlands. So he lives, right, Dana's in Richlands. My mom is from Lebanon, and we were in Paint Lick, which was like really close to both of them. And it was actually good. I got this really cool shot while I was there. It was beautiful. It's one of the best shots I've ever gotten. I don't want to get on to photography, but it is one of the best shots I've ever gotten. Come here, baby. So I'm glad it went. It's kind of weird the way it worked out. I didn't plan it, but maybe someone did. It was the most awesome shot. There was like the clouds had like come down and like settled down in the valley, and it was this full moon that was on top of like this mountain range. I mean, if I didn't know better, I'd say someone planned this out to look amazingly and beautiful just like that. But I didn't plan it. God planned it. But yet, at the same time, I'm Emmanuel or Christ, whichever term you'd like to use. So it's weird. This is a weird thing that's happening. But I was sitting there, and I walked outside, and there was just this beautiful, I mean, it was divine. This mountain range, the full moon, the clouds were like in the valley. It's the coolest thing I'd ever seen. It was amazing. And it just happened naturally. I didn't plan it. I just walked outside and it was there. But it's because we happened to stay in Paint Lick, which is close to Lebanon. It's where my mom grew up, She was there her whole life, and we got a little patch of land there. Might end up, back there one day. Who knows? And then it's close to Richlands with Dana. It just worked out. It's weird. And my accent started to come back when I got up there. It's very strange. Like, you go back to your home and, like, it's weird the way your body just, I don't know, you just kind of fall into it. It's very strange. But now that I got totally sidetracked, I told you this video was going to be terrible. I haven't made one of these in a while. And I don't think I should be making a ton of videos. I kind of know when to make them. I'll make a video when it's something that I cannot get out in text and I cannot get out in a picture. Like I can do like photography I like from the symbolism and things like that. So I like photography. I like text. It's quick. It's easy. It doesn't require a lot of bandwidth. Doesn't take up a lot of your time. You can go about your day and it doesn't bother you. But sometimes there's some things that happen like this night terror that I'm going to get into. But sometimes things happen and I can't explain it in text. I can't get it out in 200 characters, and a picture doesn't really tell the story, the whole story. So sometimes I like to do videos. It won't be all the time. Because of like vanity and pride and things like that, I have to be very careful, which is a great point. That goes back to one of his points that he makes over and over and over, is that one of the biggest sins that we have that I agree with is pride. It's like self-asserting pride is what he calls it. And it's kind of like pride leads to all of these other deadly sins, right? These virtues that are supposed to offset them. But essentially, his position is that pride is like the number one thing. And they say like pride comes before the fall, right? We're fallen. So it does make sense. that pride is almost like the mother of all the sins because we're so proud of ourselves. Proud of ourselves, proud of our appearance, proud of our country, proud of our nation, proud of our color, whatever the case is, it's pride that causes all these sins and divisions, amongst men. And then we end up killing each other and stealing everything and raping everything. And it's awful. It's why this place has fallen. There's a reason that I'm telling you the same thing, kind of, roughly, that Jesus told you, right? And that the apostles said. And the apostles were so gung-ho because they got to walk around with Jesus, right? He called himself the Son of God. And I agree. It's like that. It is just like that. Because you cannot compare the incarnated version of God. It does not compare to God. So you can call it the Son of God. That's fine. I'm fine with it. Because it's just like that. It's absolutely like that. Because I'm down here trying to figure it out with the rest of you. But I do know who I am, even though I'm just this version. Nothing even close to that. Not even close, not even in the same ballpark. Not to be confused with that at all. So let's be clear. But I am who I am, so I'm still going to talk to you and tell you, and you can decide for yourself. But I'm just explaining to you how it feels from my side, knowing who I am, but not being am. It's weird. It's a trinity. It's very strange. I didn't truly understand it until I lived it. But, so yeah, we went up there and back to pride. So that's what he strives on over and over, even though I'm only halfway through. So he goes about pride, and like pride is basically it. And it makes sense because, the training that I'm getting and things that I'm learning, it's like, we're not supposed to be wearing cosmetics. We're not supposed to be worrying about our hair. We're not supposed to be, super concerned with our vanity and things like that. All things that are in the Bible. These things are all in there. But people read it and they don't actually live it. They kind of live this Americanized version of Christianity, or actually world version of Christianity. This guy, I think, is Orthodox. So they take it pretty seriously. They go back to like the apostles and Christ, Jesus. So they take it all the way back there. Like the true version of it, not the version over 2,000 years that got watered down, and people decided, I want to put this in, I want to put this in, well, I want to change this a little bit. Like people, just kept stretching it. And essentially, and he says this also, is that, we made ourselves God. That sounds so strange. But we made ourselves, man made himself God. So we stopped listening to God upstairs. We stopped listening to God. And we made ourselves God. So we started to govern ourselves. We didn't care about the commandments that were given to us, right? We lie, we steal, we cheat, we fornicate, we're adulterers, we're murderers. You go down the list, right? We're drunks, drug addicts, we overindulge, we're envious, we're lustful, absolutely prideful, and strangely enough, that one's at the top. I didn't even do that on purpose, but that's at the top. We're lazy sometimes, all of it. But it's kind of like we made ourselves into gods, and we stopped listening to the Father, right? The parent, the Father, God, the unseeable God, the one that knows everything, can do everything, can see thousands of years into the future and pre-plan things, to that degree, which that level of knowledge, I can't even comprehend it. To think that you could look out thousands of years into the future and somehow get the right people. Sorry, I told you I'm going to drive fast. I'm not drinking water. And I actually don't do this unless I make videos. It's quite weird. But somehow I could look out like thousands of years into the future and like plan like who's going to be born where and what's going to happen in their life, even though they have free will. And that's something that can't be violated. So that part's very strange. But somehow God knows what we're going to do, even though we have the choice. We have free will. We can decide it. But it's like God kind of knows what's going to happen, even though we have free will and we're going to screw up. Which is why we're here. We're not ready. We're not perfect. That's why we're humans, right? Humanimals. So, losing my train of thought. But essentially, that's it. And you can see thousands of years into the future and who's born where and what they're going to deal with in their life and the choices they're going to have to make and the mistakes that they might make. I can't even fathom that level of intelligence, which is why that Father, Son, I understand why it's called that, and why Jesus said he alluded to the fact that he was God, but he was smart enough to be like, no, I'm the Son, that's the Father, right? So I totally understand. It makes sense. It's a Trinity. It's very weird, but we'll move on so I can get back to my story. Pride's at the top. We're all very pride. We made ourselves God, so we govern ourselves. We make our own laws, like abortion, right? We're not supposed to be killing anything. It said, "Thou shalt not kill," right? These are commandments that came from God. They're not negotiable. You can't bend them and stretch them. Certain things are pretty clear. That's why I'm a vegan. I don't kill ants. I don't kill roaches. I don't kill lizards. I don't kill anything. Do I accidentally step on things as I walk around in my day-to-day life? Yes, I'm sure I do. I can't help it. And you know what? God understands that. God built this world. It is the way it is. I don't need to understand every little thing. And I don't need to have every little answer. If I did need those answers, God would have given them to me. But I've got enough. I've got enough information to know that I shouldn't be killing. And he said it. Thou shalt not kill. Right? But we do. We do kill because we made ourselves God. We decided, well, in certain situations I can kill. It's okay. No, because God already gave you the answer. The answer is you're not going to kill. I understand because I'm growing up here. I live here. I grew up here. And as I've explained, for the vast majority of my life, I was no different than you, making the same stupid mistakes. And I'm really glad that God was smart enough to work it out this way because it makes sense to me now. And I think I explained before, what good would it do for you to have some perfect Jesus pop out of the womb, running around, never sins his entire life, right? Lives this beautiful, holy life, just glowing all over the place. That would be amazing. And I'd love to see it. But I don't know what good it would do you or me, right? Because how would you compare yourself, right? Sinful human animal is a nice way to look at it, right? We're elevated above animals because we're different. We have more agency. We have more decision-making power and things like that. But we're not divine, right? We're not angelic. We're not that good. We're a step above animals. We're humans, and we have the ability to be holy and sanctified. But we choose to act like animals most of the time and do whatever makes us feel good. So whatever makes us feel good, we think that's okay to do. Even though God has given us directions and commandments to say, no, you can't do that, because that's, slothful, or you might end up doing any number of things to harm people. But we do it because we took the place of God. We stopped listening to the Father. So we stopped listening to God. And that's why this place is an absolute trash bin. Right? It's hellish. It's fallen. And it's full of fallen people, fallen human beings like me and you. Because we don't listen to God. And he talks about this constantly, about the self-asserting pride. And something else he goes into deeply, and he reiterates over and over, is its obedience. It is absolutely, we are disobedient, right? We're fallen because we disobeyed God's orders, commandments, guidance from a father, right? God loves us. We are children. That's what we are. We are children to God. Unfortunately, we're bad children, and we don't act right at all. Some of us better than others. I'm not technically a child of God just because of the whole Trinity thing, but it's fine. We'll just go with it. We're kind of like children that don't listen, but we absolutely have the ability to, and we can change this place anytime we'd like to. It's up to us. It just requires obedience. And I'll tie it in now to the monastery. So this guy, I think, was a monk, archbishop, but, monastery, very monastic. So I got it in my head. I'm like, hey, I want to go see a monastery. That sounds awesome. I totally understand why they would do it. I don't think I should do it because I think it's better for you. And I think my whole purpose here is to share information. So I think it's better for you that I'm kind of out and about with society, giving like a realistic example or just one realistic example of how this can go. Do I think it would be nice to go sit on a mountaintop, for 40 days or even longer, for months or years, just to sit there and commune with God and nature? Yeah, I think that'd be awesome. To not worry about the world, to not worry about money, and just sit around and just read the Bible and contemplate things and talk to God. Yeah, I think it'd be awesome. I don't think it would do much for you. And just the way my life is playing out, I don't think that's the way I'm supposed to learn. I think I'm learning as I go through this experience, this life in a city, right? With my mom and my brother. So I think that's how it's supposed to play out. So could I go sit in a monastery and just sit around and contemplate and fast and, and just try to be holy and try to get above the wants of this world so that I can focus on what it would take to be holy enough to go home to God, right? To be that holy, to be that sanctified. Yeah, I think it'd be awesome. I just don't think it'd be a good information for you. I don't think it'd be a good experience. I don't think it'd be useful for you. I think it's more useful for people to see a human being, a normal human being, and live his whole life making all kinds of mistakes. Find a way to be sanctified, to be completely holy and as close to perfect or perfect as we can get, so that when we die, we can go home. When we shed these bodies, shed these bodies, perfect soul, you go home. You're with God forever. That's the goal. That's why we're here, right? We're not here to be chasing, multiple houses and fancy cars and, running around, getting hookups and booty calls all over the place, acting like animals, right? Some animals run around and procreate all over the place. That's all they think about. They wake up and they think about food, shelter, and sex. I'm sorry, but as human beings, God expects more of us than to run around worried about food, water, shelter, and sex. Because that's what animals do. And animals are part of creation. I love animals. I think they're cute. I think they're awesome to be around. And that's why I don't harm them, like a lot of you do. You eat them. And you enslave them and forcefully impregnate them and do horrible things that if a human being did that to another human being, you would absolutely, hopefully, be really upset about it. But like I said, this is a fallen world. This is like Temptation Island. Horrible reference, I know, but it's true. Look at the way people dress. It's not that different. So, but that's it. So, yeah, we're very prideful and we're not obedient. Like, look at what Jesus did. If you go back and look at Jesus and what he did, he knew, given what was going on with Rome and the Pharisees and the whole the church structure over there, the synagogues, he knew that what he was saying was going to get him killed. And he even admitted it. He knew he was going to die because God let him know. And he was a perfect person, right? We're going with the scripture. He was born perfect, never made a sin, which I don't know how that happened, but that's how it's written. So we'll accept that. I don't know how he was perfect his whole life. And I mean, are you kidding me? You never sinned one time in your entire life? I don't know. I've never seen anyone like that. And I don't even think that would make a good, compelling story, a biblical story. But that's how it's written. So we'll accept it because we weren't there. But by the time that he was going through his ministry, he was perfect. So it's holy and I don't know about perfect. That's maybe perfect is a stretch because he did turn water into wine. And I absolutely disagree with that. That makes no sense to me. Number one, he was out at a wedding, worldly events like that, and you're turning water into wine. I've had my discrepancies with it, but that's the scripture, right? So we'll just go with it. This is the New Testament, so you're going to see it real. There won't be any interpretation. I don't have any scribes running around writing things down for me. You're just going to get it raw, and then you can decide for yourself. But there are things that I absolutely believe about the Bible, 100%, because I'm going through them now, right? I was directed. I have angels working with me. I don't want to go into it. I know they don't like, that be talking about something like that. I know that they can't, because of pride, they can't get involved like that. But it's in the Bible, so I will talk about it. And it did happen to me, is happening to me. So yeah, he was directed to fast for 40 days while they taught him. Now, granted, it's not 100% correct because that tutelage goes a lot longer than 40 days, as I've mentioned before. But it is in the Bible, and it is absolutely correct. And he alluded to the fact that he was God without saying it, right, because of pride. And not only that, you don't have the information. You're not the ultimate God, right? The ultimate, top of the triangle, the one that we can't see. That's God. And then you have the Holy Spirit, which resided in Christ and believers, right? Also came down at Pentecost. And you have Christ, which is the incarnation of God, which is nothing close to God, even though it is. Very strange. But that's how it works. But obedience, going back to the obedience part. He was so obedient that he knew, being perfect at that point in time, walking around, teaching everyone the information that he was learning, the divine knowledge that he was getting from God the Father, right? Through the Son, if you would like to call it that, through Christ, and the angels that were tutoring him. You're getting divine knowledge, and he was too. He was getting divine knowledge, and they let him know. It says in the scripture, he knew he was going to die. And you see how Rome was treating people back then? So that's not a stretch of the imagination. And he was going up against the church structure, right? The temple. They're all holy temple. They love the temple, right? They love to go in there and change money, and it's where they met. It wasn't just religious. It was way more than that. But the temple was everything to them. They had created an idol out of this temple, and they loved it. And they thought God just sat in this temple. And that's the only place God was. He was just in the temple, and he was in the building because he likes buildings for some reason. He loves beautiful buildings for whatever reason. So he's just sitting in there, like a little Buddha just sitting in this beautiful building. But they love the temple. So he was going against the temple, and he threatened the temple to tear it down and rebuild it back up in 3 days, which they said was basically like a personification of his body. But he knew it was going to happen. I guess they let him know. So he knew he was going to die. I don't know. I guess that's what they said, but it was total obedience. So he went through with it anyway, because he must have known with the Romans that somebody was going to kill him, and the Pharisees and the Jewish structure, the Jewish religious structure, somebody was going to kill him, because it goes back to jealousy. You've got this guy, right? Comes from this town that's not nice. It's not a fancy town. It's like Jacksonville or something. It's not a fancy place. It's not Miami. It's not Los Angeles. It's not any other place, right? Chicago or wherever, any other place in the world. London. It's not from some rich, affluent place. God comes to incarnate as Christ. It's never, just in case this happens again in 2,000 years, I don't know why it would need to. But maybe it will. I don't want to say it won't. That's up to God. But I'm just saying, if it's something that happens like every 2,000 years, it's kind of like a check to the people that are still here, to get them back on the path. I don't know that it would be needed, because unlike the Bible, imagine if Jesus Christ had a YouTube channel, right? And you could just sit there and go watch YouTube videos of Jesus just sitting there, just chatting in his cave or whatever he's in. Imagine. Because then you wouldn't have the problem with the scribes, right? You wouldn't have the problem of, they wrote this down 40 or 60 or 100, depending on the book that you're reading, right? Hundreds of years later. You wouldn't have that issue. You'd be able to sit down and be like, I watched the video, or I saw the text that he wrote, because he didn't write it himself. He had scribes write it. He was busy. He was busy being taught by the angels and relaying that information and doing the miracles and all that. So I guess he was busy. He didn't have time to write it down. But it was written down by other people. That's the problem. And you'll always have people say, it didn't really happen because he didn't write it down, and it happened 40 to 60 years after he was dead. That's when they were writing it, or 30 years, whatever. People disagree. And that's fine. They can disagree, but oral traditions were way better back then. They were much better at relaying oral traditions than we are today. It's like the telephone game. You'll always have things that get messed up a little bit, but apparently in Jewish culture, like oral tradition, they're pretty good about relaying that stuff, accurately, to other generations and things like that. But I can absolutely tell you, some of that stuff absolutely happened, 100%, because I'm going through it right now. It's the same process, right? And the thorn that was in Paul's side, I know exactly what that feels like. I get it. The Bible's it's not wrong. Old Testament, I have a lot of disagreements with the Old Testament. Not all of it. You got the Ten Commandments in there, and that's rock solid. But some of it, I have problems with some of it. And you know what? That's why it's a New Testament. It makes sense that every 2,000 years or so, got to be hey, you probably need to get things settled out here, so come back down, incarnate, But would this be required again? I don't know. I don't think so. I think things are going to be so clear this time, and there'll be evidence of it. There won't be any, debates about who wrote this and when did they write it, and well, the cultural times. I think it'll be much better this time because everyone's going to get to see it. And there's like 8 billion of us. So you got 8 billion people currently getting the same exact message. And then they can relay that on. Plus, we'll have the videos, we'll have the text, we'll have the photos, all that stuff. So would it be required again? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe in 2,000 years. Because as James, I have no idea what it's going to be like in 2,000 years. Look at how fast technology is moving. Look at AI, right? You got AI. Who knows where that's going to go? It doesn't look like it's going anywhere nice. But who can say? Look at how fast technology has moved, computer technology. Look how fast it's moved in 100 years. Just look at a 100-year slice, right? And now think of 2,000 years. Would it be necessary to come back down and readjust? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But so that's that. And I totally forgot about my story. That's the whole reason I'm doing this, is because I had this nightmare, night terror, if you will. I thought it was a terror, but it ties into this book, this author, Archbishop Averky Tolshov. I think he was a Russian and then migrated to the U.S., I guess. But so far, I'm loving the book. It goes constantly talking about pride, and it's one of our biggest issues, and how it leads to all the other sins, and ascetism, which ties into my nightmare. Like I said, I'm on a dry fast now. This is like day 2. I feel okay. I feel fine. I'll drink whenever I feel the need to, and I don't think it'll be 40 days. Not this time. I think that was a one and done for me. And even in the Bible, I think biblically, there's 40 days is kind of, you do that once. But they put themselves in uncomfortable situations. They reject the world. They reject worldly possessions. They reject, food and water and things like that, and comforts, like creature comforts and sugar and spicy foods and stuff like that. And strong flavors. Like they eat very like bland food, things that aren't, like, I guess fancy is the way they describe it, or the way I describe it. But like very bland foods. They try to humble themselves. And they speak a lot about like Christian humility and love, like Jesus said, right? Love God and love your neighbor. Love others, right? Love all others. So neighbors is kind of too specific. It's like, what does that mean? Like, I only love people in Mexico and Canada? No. I mean, you love everyone, right? It's God's creation, so we love it. We honor God's creation. The animals, the people, the planet, all of it, right? We're trying to take care of everything. We don't want to hurt the animals. We don't want to hurt us. We want our souls to be sanctified so we can go home to heaven, right? We want to take care of the planet because we live here. So we're probably going to have more people that need to become, sanctified in the future. I don't think everyone's going to get this right all at once. The same thing happened with Jesus, right? He came down here. He was humble. He humbled himself because God wanted him to humble himself. That's why. Why? And I never even understood it fully until I read this, is that he died the way he died, that humiliating death, right? Staked up there with criminals, scourged. If you've never seen what that looks like, you should look that up. It's awful. It's like this cat of 9 tails or whatever, and it's got like either bones or metal shards or something on the end, and it literally just like rips and shreds your back and the muscles. I don't even think, like, even if he hadn't died on the cross, I think people that are scourged, I don't even know if they can walk right the rest of their life because there's so much damage done on the back of your back. It looks absolutely horrific. I cannot imagine. Well, no, I can't imagine that humans would do it to other humans because we're so flawed and we're fallen. I get it. But it's one of the nastiest things you can possibly do to a human being. It's absolutely terrible. And they did it. And I don't know how they could live with themselves. But think about it. He was absolutely, this is God in the flesh. Just the fleshly version, not God. Just to be clear, don't want any pride issues. Don't strike me down. But it was God in the flesh. Emmanuel, right? God with us. God like us, right? God as one of us, right? So we can relate. So it makes sense. And then you can see the progression. But he came down. He was born in a place that wasn't fancy, right? Wasn't born in a fancy place. didn't have a lot of money, didn't have a lot of possessions, things that we love, money, possessions, like fancy everything, done up makeup, looking beautiful, like Instagram worthy. He wasn't like that because that's not what God is about. God and Christianity is about humility and love. It's like the easiest way to put it. It's humility, humbling yourself because God wants us to be humble because God knows that our biggest issue, or one of our biggest issues, maybe the mother of all issues, is pride. You know, we're so proud of ourselves because of our possessions and things that leads to greed, man. It's weird. It's like that's the top. So God or Jesus came down here and humbled himself and was born in a not so nice city, not a lot of money, didn't have super nice clothes, didn't really have anything really. You know, had minimal possessions. I'm sure people helped him out and stuff, and he went to people's houses and hung out, but didn't really have much. Wasn't of this world. Was here, but not of this world. And that's how he lived. But that was because he was called to be humbled because our biggest issue is pride. That's our number one issue is pride. That's why he died the way he did. And that makes sense to me. You know, why would he die with criminals? Why would he get scourged? Why would he probably get spit on? Why would he have a crown of thorns and they put a stupid robe on him and made fun of him and laughed at him and staked him up there and literally staked him eventually? You know, they put him up on the tree, the telephone pole. They jabbed him after, I think he was already dead at that point because the liquid came out. So he was already dead. He died a horrible, shameful, humiliating death. Why in the world would God do that? Why? What sense does that make? You know, he was obedient because he was in human form. He didn't have God's intelligence, didn't have God's knowledge. He was walking the path that was laid before him by God, the all-knowing God. So he was walking that path, but as a human being. It's really strange, but he was very humble and he was full of love and humility. Things that, as human beings, we might call it love, you know, but it's not true love. Like, love and Christianity is like sacrificial love. That's what Christianity is to me. It's like literally sacrificial love. And I'm not talking about going out there and killing animals. That doesn't make any sense at all. That's really stupid. You're taking an innocent animal, doesn't know any better, and you're slaughtering it because you're sinning. And you can't get right with God because you don't follow the commandments, right? Because you don't obey. You don't obey God's commandments and you're sinful. So you're going to go find something innocent to kill. That makes no sense. Never has, never will to me. Absolutely not. But because of what Jesus did, you all right? All right. But because of what Jesus did, eventually they stopped all the animal sacrifices anyway. It's interesting. I'm not saying that's why he did it. You know, I don't think that's why he did it. I think he came down here to save us. But I'm just, as an aside, I'm just saying eventually the animal sacrifices did stop because of that. So a nice bonus, because that's absolutely wrong to murder anything, right? Thou shalt not kill. It's pretty clear, but we just follow it when we want to, right? We follow it like, oh, we shouldn't kill, so, well, I'll go kill these chickens because I like chicken wings. Or I'll go kill these animals because I like steak or whatever it is. God was very clear. He said, thou shalt not kill. He didn't specify and say, thou shalt not kill animals. Thou shalt not kill people. It was just, thou shalt not kill, period. It's very clear. But we, making ourselves gods, we reinterpreted that to be like, well, I like chicken wings, so I think I'll go kill a chicken. And then I think I'll fry it up and I'll eat it. Because even though God said not to kill, well, I'll just assume he meant the animals are fair game and we can just eat those up. No, he said you can't kill. And I know that because I know how I think and how I act. I don't want to kill those animals. Even though they're not human beings, they are different. More is expected of us, right? Of course. Right? You've got the divine, you've got God, you've got angels, right? We don't compare ourselves to angels. We're not that good. And we don't compare ourselves to God. We're humans, and we don't compare ourselves to animals because we think we're superior. Our pride. We are so proud to be human beings. We are the top of the food chain, right? That's what you think. Or that's what everyone thought until about 2 years ago. We're human beings. We're like gods. We build these beautiful bridges and temples and buildings. Oh, it's amazing. It's so fancy. It's so great. We're awesome. We get so puffed up in our human pride because we can build something. You built a bridge. Wow, that's awesome. You built a building. Congrats. That's really cool. Looks great. Looks amazing. How's your soul? How does your soul look? When you die, are you going to heaven? Those are questions that you might want to concern yourself with a little bit more than a nice building or a nice car or nice makeup or nice clothing or whatever other materialistic thing you want or you're chasing. You should really, like when you die, I hope that you're really certain that you're going to heaven, that your soul is pure and you are sanctified and you follow God's commandments. So when you die, you're like dying on your deathbed, like, let's go. Let's go. Let's get it on. We're going to die. Let's go. Come on. You shouldn't be scared of death. You should be looking forward to it eventually. I mean, you can't kill yourself because we're here to learn lessons. We're here to progress right? We're here to get better and purify our soul and shed all the sin. So you can't check out early because then you're going to miss those opportunities that you would have to clean up later. So you can't kill yourself. Thou shalt not kill applies to us. We can't kill ourselves. Like I saw there was a news story, I think it was somewhere in Pakistan or somewhere, they showed it. And I've been like over to Egypt and I saw some haze. I think some of that was desert sand for sure. But some of that I think was exhaust too, because they got a lot of cars over there too. But over in Pakistan, like they looked at the health warnings, like the PM, the 2.5 or whatever it was, and they were just looking through smog. It was just smog. It was disgusting. I don't know how you live in that. They said it causes cancer and all kinds of problems. So that is suicide. You're killing yourselves. And like what we're doing to the planet, we're killing ourselves. And plastic and everything else. I don't want this to turn into like an ecology debate, but you can't commit suicide. Thou shalt not kill includes you. So you can't kill yourselves, right? You can't destroy your planet, which is going to destroy you. So, definitely take care of the planet, take care of yourselves, but you can't kill yourself. It's not allowed. You're not allowed to kill yourself. So please stop committing suicide by your lifestyles that are impacting the earth and are going to absolutely impact you, which is what we're dealing with now. Now, granted, I think what we're in now is tribulation. I'm pretty certain of that. So I think we got a ways to go before any of that stops, but it's also climate change. So you got a combination there of climate change and tribulation. That's a nasty combination. But at the same time, it's okay because at least God would like to give us the information to help save ourselves and give us enough time to become holy so that when these bodies eventually perish, eventually, we'll go home and you can shed this and you can just be a soul, right? A discarnated soul. Be that holy, to be in communion with God. That's the goal. So we have to get there and we have to get purified. But, to do that, we're going to have to follow God's commandments and we're going to have obedience and we're going to have to lose our pride. We're going to have to understand that we are the children. God is the Father. It's that simple. It's an easy way to look at it. So when we get scolded, when bad things happen in our life because of our sin, that we bring on ourselves. So we commit these sins, and sins don't always impact you immediately. That can be down the road, which is really tricky because then you're going to think it's not fair. You're like, why is this happening to me? I'm perfect, I never sinned. I never caused. Okay, well, yeah, you have sinned. And it's like a credit card. Sin is you swiping that credit card. You're just swiping, charging up all that sin. But those penalties aren't immediate. Sometimes you'll be going through good times, like you're rich, you got plenty of money. You can afford to do a whole lot of sin. With money, it makes it easier. So you can sin. You just keep swiping that card. But eventually, the bill becomes due, and someone has to pay it, and that someone is you. So you're going to have to pay the bill for that. And that's why money and luxury and things like that is so detrimental, because you're going to think everything is good to go. You're so worried on your lower level focuses, right? Your watches and cars and buildings and sex. You want to have all kinds of sexual partners, men, women, You know, you're out there doing that, right? You're being an animal. You're acting like a soulless, no, not soulless. Sorry, Libra. It's my bad. You're acting like an animal with no agency, right? The animals, they're animals. You know, they're just animals. But they have souls, you know, but they're different than us, right? We're more of expected of us. We're more is expected because we're human beings, right? We have more agency. We can build the buildings and the bridges and all that cool stuff. So we should at least be able to follow God's commandments. We shouldn't act like animals. We shouldn't be humanimals, right? Sinful human animals. We shouldn't be that. We're expected to be more. We're expected to follow God's laws. We need to be obedient, right? You got to be obedient, and you have to have love. So, and you have to have humility. So Christianity, in my opinion, it's sacrificial love and obedience, right? It's love you love people so much that you will sacrifice your time, your money, things like that to help others. And that kind of love, I think, only comes from Christianity, because Christianity is the only religion where God comes down to earth, not as God, but as Christ, just little Christ, not big God, little Christ, but that is Emmanuel, God with us, as a human. So with all the flaws that we have and the limited knowledge that we have. But Christianity is the only religion that can claim that. And I know that it's true. Right? Even when I was growing up, I had my doubts about Christianity. You know, you read the books and it's from 2,000 years ago, and you have to understand like the time frames back then and what it meant to them at that point. It's really difficult for people to justify it. And then some of the stuff like the miracles and stuff, like who can believe in miracles like that until they see them? And God knows that we don't believe without miracles. Christianity isn't just miracles. It's the best part about Christianity is the divine knowledge, in my opinion, is the divine knowledge from God. It's the proof of God first, which should be mind-blowing, but it's the proof of God, and it's also direction. So it's like our spiritual dad, father figure, giving us information. And this is from the person who built everything. So they should know. So it's divine knowledge that we're giving that does nothing but benefit us. Forever, if you do it right. Right? You want to make it all the way home. You want to purify your soul, get sanctified, you'll be in heaven with God. Forever. But it's not easy to do that, because you have to lose your pride, which we're terrible at. We're terrible at losing our pride. We have to humble ourselves. We don't like to humble ourselves because of our pride. So if you're really proud, you're probably going to have a big problem being humble, right? So we need to show humility, be humble, and we need to show love to others. Love, like, so much love that it is sacrificial. It's not love like, oh, I'm just a nice person, I love on people, you know, when I can, when it's convenient. No, you need to, like, love on people so much that it hurts. And I'm not talking about that kind of love. I'm talking about love, like true love. Not that animal love that, I'm not talking about that. True love. So you got to be humble, and you have to be obedient, and you have to love others. Love all others, to be clear. Includes animals too. You can't just be sadistic and kill and murder and do all kinds of stuff. But that's what Christianity is. It's the only religion where God comes down to incarnate to tell us, to give us divine knowledge, right? Proof of angels, proof of God, proof of Christ. There's no other religion like that. It's only one. So, case is closed on that. I know there's like lots of religions in the book. You got Judaism, you got Islam, you know, they have their different varieties. But just in general, Christianity is the only religion where God comes down to give us divine knowledge with the help of angels. That's it. It's the only one. There's no competition. So we should probably listen when God wants to help us. When God the Father would like to help us, we should definitely listen, but it requires obedience. Obedience at a sacrificial level, like Jesus did. Jesus knew he was going to die, I guess. I mean, which is strange, because he did cry out on the cross, you know, God, why hast thou forsaken me? So, in my opinion, reading it, you know, 2024, it sounds like to me maybe he didn't think it would go that far. He thought he would be protected at the end. I don't know. But it sounds like he even questioned his own faith at the very end, which who wouldn't? I sure would. You know, God, you're taking care of me. You got angels looking after me. I'm here teaching. I'm doing your job. I'm doing your work. And then you tell me I got to turn myself in? What? I got to turn myself into the evil people? Right? The bad people, the evil people? I have to turn myself into them so that they can scourge me, as horrible as that is? Jam a thorn of crowns on my head? Right? Probably spit on me, I would guess. Laugh at me, make fun of me, dress me up in some stupid outfit. Put King of the Jews, like, I guess that was the biggest thing, is the Romans had a problem with that. Said he was a king. But he was a king. He was God's king. Because God is, I mean, our version of king and what God thinks is a king is two different things. But it was done in that time frame where kings was a human thing. Like, humans care about kings. God doesn't get, it's God, who cares? But God knew that we cared about kings, so he was the king. He was the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings, or however that term goes. But that's what upset them so much. And then he talked about, paying taxes to Caesar and things like that. But he was completely humiliated and scourged, humiliated, stuck up on a stake, out in the sun, laughed at, had soldiers laughing at him, in front of the whole world. And he went through that. That kind of humility. Probably to fix the fact that we're so prideful, right? He didn't, granted, the Holy Ghost came down, right, at Pentecost, so there were reasons for it. Maybe it was for that. That's quite possible. But either way, he was absolutely humiliated as God's king and humbled himself, but he even said it in the scripture. He knew he was going to die, and he still gave himself up. They didn't fight when they came to him in the garden to arrest him. They didn't fight. One of them wanted to, but he's like, no, don't do it. God wants me to give myself up, so I'll give myself up. That level of obedience, knowing that you're going to be scourged, and at the time, he had to have known he would have been crucified, 100%, because that's like one of the worst tortures they could do. So he had to know it. So we have to be obedient to that level, to God's commandments, even when it doesn't make sense. Even if you think, you're going to die or whatever's going to happen, even then you have to be obedient. And that is so difficult for a human being because we're so proud of who we are. We're like, oh, I work for my money. I can do what I want. I can wear what I want. I can do. No. You can. You can keep swiping that sin card all you want. You can swipe it until it starts smoking if you'd like to. But you're going to pay for it. And God doesn't want us to pay for it. Because God knows how things work here, in this wonderful location we're in. God understands how this place works and how bad it is. So God is giving us the information and the rules so that we can sanctify ourselves and become holy and pure. So that when we die and we shed these bodies, we can just be a soul, with God in heaven, eternally. That's the game plan. But to do that, we have to have Jesus' level of love and obedience. Mainly obedience, because that's what he was. He was obedient to the point of death. He went and got scourged and crucified, all because God told him to. That's it. So, I don't know. All we're going to have is this story that we can see. So, that's good. And like I said, I'm not going to be making videos all the time, because somehow I can feel it. I know when I'm supposed to make a video, even though they're terrible and I'm the worst. Like, I don't have any materials. I don't have any good slideshows or transitions or anything. I don't have a merch account. I don't have anything here. I know I do it terrible, but at least you get it raw. It's the truth as I know it. So I give it to you how I get it. And hopefully this way there'll be no discrepancies later about who he was, what he was about, what he said. I don't have people, I'm not going to have scribes writing for me in 50 years. I don't know, maybe somebody will write in 50 years, but I don't think it'll be necessary because everything will be, from the horse's mouth. It's for me. And you can decide for yourself, but I'm just telling you, I got a pretty good team. And this information comes from the top. So God absolutely requires obedience as any good father would. Because why do you give your kids rules? Not to be a jerk. You give them rules because you're trying to protect them and set them up for the future, the long future. So that's why God gives us guidance, because God, unfortunately, thankfully, I'm not, God, I'm right here, but God has to sit down here and watch us fail miserably all the time. Watch us down here in this place, failing constantly. And the only reprieve is that every 2,000 years, for whatever reason, don't know, but for every 2,000 years, at least in this juncture, gets to come down, put on flesh, and teach. And just pray that that teaching is absorbed and that people use that information and change their lifestyles, change their ways, and then they can become holy so that when they die, they go home. Why it works out that way, why it's 2,000 years, I don't know. Will it be 2,000 years from now? I don't know. I don't think it'll be necessary just because of how this played out this time, but who can say? I don't know. That's up to God. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. But I just think that we should absolutely listen to God's... Oh, jeez. This is running long. Sorry. This is going to be a long one. I apologize. It's going to tie up a lot of your day. There. I promise you I won't let it go past there. I won't let it run out again. But going back to my story, like an hour in here, I haven't even got to my story yet. So I think I covered everything there I wanted to, as best I can tell. So this night terror that I had, which ties back into ascetism, which I'm a big proponent of. I'm testing it now with the fasting, and I'm trying not to eat like the spicy foods. I'm not eating anything right now, but not the spicy foods, no sugars, like the pleasantries in life that normal people would want. I'll try to like shun those as best I can without like living in a gutter, so that I can still, live in a house and make videos and stuff like that when I need to. But tying it back in. So because of the ascetism, trying to focus on my holy self and not my worldly self. Because the holy self just wants to get back home to God. That's it. I just want to go home to God. But I definitely got to like show y'all the way while I'm here. But that's the goal. Like I want to go home eventually. But to do that, I have to worry about my soul or my spiritual self and not my lower level stuff, which is like, oh, I'm going to run around and get money and get a house and get a car and have sex and all this. It's garbage, right? This worldly garbage. And I'm totally negating the spiritual side, which is ascetism. So you struggle, is my understanding. And I'll probably will do a video once I've read this, like maybe 2 or 3 more times, and I really have an understanding of it. Because right now I'm just kind of giving you a cursory glance, and I'm halfway through. It's not really fair. But I definitely recommend, if you haven't gotten this, I don't want to be commercial. I'm just telling you that it's helping me a lot. So you do with that what you will. You want to get it, get it. You don't. I don't care. But I find it very helpful. So, but I'm trying to do this, and part of it is celibacy. This is really strange to get into. But like, they're celibate, right? They don't have sex. They don't get married. They don't, the spicy foods, the sugary foods. They don't, the very bland food. They try to just cut the world out as much as they can, so they can focus on the holy side of the house, right? Their actual goal while they're here. The thing that we completely avoid is what they're focusing on, right? They're worried about their soul, about purifying their soul so they can go home. We're worried about lower level human stuff, houses, cars, makeup, sex, garbage, right? It's just human stuff. So we're worried about that, but they know how to focus on the spiritual, which is crazy, which is what I'm trying to do now. And because of that, they talk about the monastery a lot. So I found a monastery. It was down in Bunnell, Florida. It wasn't a huge one. It was a little one. I think the one they have is in New York. And I think it's in Jordanville. Jordanville, New York. Holy Trinity Publications. So this one is in New York, and that one looks much better. But the one I found that I could go to was going to be down there in Bunnell. So I went down there and I toured it. It was really cool. I went into the church and checked that out. And then they had the, you go through this like really fancy garden that they have. I know it's fancy, but they had all the stations of Christ, right? All the stations of the Passion where you would go through, and it shows how he was crucified and all this stuff. And it was nice. It just kind of showed, there was many of them. I put the pictures up, but there were like many of them. And it just showed the whole process of him going through it all the way, through transcendence and all that. It's really cool. And I really enjoyed it, but it felt good going there, obviously. But I did that, and then I tied that in with I had some personal sins that I was dealing with, that were getting better, but they were still nagging problems, and I got those resolved finally. I got that all done, and I think just the timing, the way it worked out, like the timing, kind of seemed perfect. I mean, I think it should have happened sooner, but it is what it is. That's how it's playing out. So I was kind of tying it in with like the ascetism and like celibacy and things like that, but I had some private sins that I was dealing with, and I finally got them worked out. And this is a little bit ago, and I tied that in. I'm reading about ascetism, if I'm pronouncing that right, and like these monks and these nuns and celibacy and denying yourself worldly pleasures and all these fancy possessions and things like that, and chasing money and chasing people's bodies, you know what I mean, and all this stuff. And it just makes sense. And they tie it back to like the apostles, how the apostles lived, how Christ lived. That's true Christianity. It's not the stuff that you see when you go to church, right? And I've been to them, like non-denominational churches and stuff like that. And there's all these like fancy, the musicians are up there. And I love the music. I'm not going to lie. I love the music. It's nice. The verbiage doesn't really go with the message, though. That's the problem. And you got the smoke machines and the laser lights and all this stuff. And it looks nice and people get into it. But I don't think a lot of people live like the apostles lived. Like the apostles lived, I don't think people are living like that. And, nuns and things like that, and monks, I don't think people are living like that. But that's literally, that's what Jesus' message was, to forget about this world and focus on going home. Granted, we're still going to have to live here. So we do, you got to kind of mesh those two together a bit. But we don't live God's commandments out. We lie and we cheat and we steal and we adulter and we fornicate and we kill, and we're prideful and lustful and everything else. And we're so worried about vanity, so worried. We got nails on and makeup. You can't even tell who the person is. They're a whole different person when they put the makeup on. They take the makeup off, you wouldn't even know who they are, right? You see all these people, these news people, like they look like models. They're basically news models is what they are. And they get their talking points that they spew from the corporations or the governments or whoever gives it to them. And they spew this garbage out there, and they kind of poison the population. They poison their minds. But I don't want to get off on topic of that. I don't want to talk about governments and stuff like that too much. But I'm tying it all together now. Here we go. Finally, we got a little time left. So kind of shunning the worldly things, focusing on the spiritual level instead of like the physical, worldly, human/animal level. Go down to this monastery, had a really cool experience looking, all throughout like the stations of the Passion and going through all that. And then I told you I cleaned up my life a little bit. There had been some sin there, some personal sin that I'd gotten rid of. Finally kind of crossed that hurdle. And it all came together at the same time, which is strange, but that's how it happened. I don't know why it happened that way, it just did. I got this book out of the blue. We got that stuff worked out around the same time. I started, I realized I had a few pounds on me, so I had some gluttony issues. I was eating too much sweet stuff, too much spicy stuff, too much things like luxurious, I guess you would say, like luxurious meals. Even though they're vegan, they were still luxurious. They were really nice. They weren't like humble, like humility, humble. So they weren't like humble meals. I try to dress humble as I can, and I don't really care too much about my appearance. It is what it is. But it was cool. I had a cool experience there. I got that sin taken care of finally. And it makes sense, why are nuns and monks and stuff, like, why are they celibate? I'm just going to tell you, like, to God, like, sex is kind of icky. It's kind of gross. And which is strange because, yeah, we're designed like this. Like, men and women are designed to, like, work together. But that whole other process there, the physical process to make kids, it's kind of icky. It's kind of gross, especially what it's turned into. You can go out there and look at any nasty amounts of porn, and don't do it, but you know what I mean. It's in the culture. And you look at how these musicians dress, they dress like harlots, right? People dress like basically like prostitutes or strippers. That's how they dress. And little kids are out there dressed like this. I go to the beach and I see what they put the kids in. Like, are you kidding me? You think God approves of that? You think God approves of your little girl or boy running around in a two-piece? All that pride, showing off your chest, male or female, showing off your legs, your buttocks, all that stuff. No, absolutely not. If you want to go to the beach, okay. But you better have something on. You better have everything covered up, like some sleeves on, some pants on. However you want to figure it out, that's up to you. But God does not expect us to be running around here bare-chested, so worried about our bodies and our vanity. We're at the gym, pumping those weights all the time, like trying to get buff. Why? Because you want to puff your pride up. I don't think people are ready for the level of like humbleness or humility. I don't think people are ready for Christianity, not true Christianity. They're used to that weak Christianity you get when you go out to the churches these days, right? Before you head off to the barbecue and before you sit around and watch sports. They're ready for that kind of Christianity, which guess what? That's not Christianity. Christianity came from Christ, right? And comes from Christ. But that's the real Christianity. It's not what we chose to make it, right? When we watered it down over thousands, hundreds of years, right? You just keep watering it down. You're like, I see that commandment, but I'm going to stretch it out a little bit, I want it to fit my life. I don't want to obey God's commandments. I want to just stretch it out so I can fit my life in there. I want to worry about my life. So I know God's got these rules, but, I really like watching football, so I'm going to watch it like, 15 hours a week, and then I'm going to talk about another 10. Or anything, right? Anything. Video games, movies, whatever you're going to do. Like, right? There's virtues, there's sins. But we don't listen to God. We want to do what we want to do. So over time, that message was watered down. And it just continues to get watered down. So it needs to be real Christianity, which is complete obedience to God. Doesn't mean you need to sit around and worship God, all day long. It's not that kind of situation. I think that the only thing God wants from us is communion, which is kind of tough to do because we're down here in these bodies sinning all over the place, in this place. So I think God would love it if we would just follow the directions that are given to us, the commandments, so that we can become pure and holy enough that we can eventually be in communion with God, in the presence of God, physically. I think that's what God wants. But God is not going to hang out with a bunch of sinners. That's not going to happen. God is holy and pure. Pure, like perfectly pure. So if you want to hang out with God, you're going to have to be perfectly pure, which is going to be difficult because we're so prideful that we won't listen to the directions or the instructions and the commandments. We won't do it. We're too busy focused on us. Me. We're worried about us, right? I work for this money so I can go out and spend whatever money I want to do. I'll do whatever I want to do and I'll sleep whatever I want. No. I mean, you can do that. There are going to be prices to be paid, but you can do it. You have free will. And your free will, for the most part, will not be violated. You are allowed to screw up here, and it's very unfortunate. Because in my opinion, free will here is a curse if you do not know how to use it. If you do not follow God's commandments, free will is a curse, and it will destroy you, in my humble opinion. Just trying to let you know. And if you want to come down here, you're here already. If you want to be here and you want to screw up and you want to sin and do whatever you want to do, you can do it. And that is the pity of it all, is that free will, I'm sure it had a purpose. But unfortunately, if you don't use your free will properly, you will destroy yourself. And you will not be in communion with God for eternity. That's the price you're going to pay. And you're going to go through some torment. Trials, torment, pain. You're going to bring all that on yourself because we don't listen to God and God's commandments. All right, so I think I got that point hammered home. So now let's get back to this nightmare that I had, which is the whole reason I was doing this video. I still haven't gotten to it. So part of it was I was walking down the street, my street actually, it's the street I live on. I was walking down the street, and I don't know why, but there were like probably at least 100. There were like 100 poisonous snakes, and this is like a vision. This wasn't just like a dream. This was a night terror. That's what the whole reason I made the video, is I wanted to tell you about this nightmare, because I think it's like a vision, like they have in the Bible, like visions. I think this was it. So I'm walking down the street, my street, and I'm going down my hill, and at the end of the hill, there's eventually like a turn that goes to the right. But I didn't get all the way there, because as soon as I got down the hill, like on the flat area, there were all these poisonous snakes like slithering across the road. And I mean, there was probably at least 100. And it's like they just hatch. I don't know how many like baby snakes have. I don't know how that works, but there were like 100 or more of them. And they were all on the road, just like slithering across the road. It was so creepy. And they were all poisonous. I could tell by the markings on them, they were poisonous. I don't think they had, I thought they were like maybe rattlesnakes, but they looked a little more green than that. So I don't know. They were definitely poisonous. I knew that for a fact they were poisonous. So as they were slithering across the road, at the end, like I said, it turns to the right there at the end. So right at the corner, there were like all these like vending machines and like food and stuff. I don't know why, but there were just like vending machines there and food, but there were all these poisonous snakes, and they were just crawling across the road, so I couldn't get there. So I turned around and came back. And I know you're thinking, wow, night terror, that doesn't sound too scary. That's not that bad. That was just part of it. The actual terror part is the next part. This is the scary part. So I could see like my foot, my heel, it was like the heel of my foot. And there was this little worm. It was like, it looked like a little white worm like you would see inside of an apple. That's what it looked like. And it was digging into my heel, like chomping at my heel. Okay? He's sitting there digging in, his little tail's flipping around, he's just chomping on my heel. It was extremely painful. This thing was devouring my leg. Granted, it's a little worm, it wasn't big, but it was just chewing away at my heel and eating its way into my body. And his little tail was flicking around, and it was like just munching, tearing it up. It was so painful. So I eventually I grabbed it with my fingers, and it took forever, but I finally got that thing ripped out of my heel, and I like threw it on the ground or something, and then it turned into this big like black fluffy spider. It was like fluffy. It wasn't like a regular spider. It had like black hairs or whatever, but it was like a fluffy spider, and it had like red antennae or something, and like red. I could tell it was poisonous. It was this poisonous black furry spider. And this thing kept trying to jump on me. I mean, it would jump on me, and I would like try to rip it off, and it would jump on me again, and I would rip it off, jump on me again. It kept jumping all over me. This thing was trying to kill me. And it was fluffy. You could tell it was poisonous. Big, furry, black spider with like red antennas or something. I don't know. Whatever, mandibles, whatever they were. This thing was absolutely poisonous, and it was tearing me up. And the crazy thing was, it was just a little worm. Right? It was in my heel, extremely painful. It was as painful as I would imagine that big black spider was. But the thing is, it was just a little worm. And I wrenched it out of my heel and I threw it down. And as soon as I did, it turned into that big black spider. And it kept jumping on me, and it was trying to devour me. And I finally got it off. And then, furry kept jumping. I wrote it all down because in the morning now you forget your dreams. Yeah, it went on for a long time. It was impossible to get the spider off. That's true. Oh, yeah. And then I even tried to trap it under the sheets. So this thing, I would like throw it down. I guess I was throwing it down on the bed. And then I would take the sheets and I would put the sheets over the spider. And I was trying to hold it down. And it was like in there fighting, like trying to get out of the sheets. And this thing was still, it was like getting out of the sheets and like coming to attack me over and over and over. So I tried to trap it under the sheets multiple times, and it kept getting out. And eventually, I don't know where this came from, but there was a doctor there for whatever reason. And this big furry black spider, it jumped onto the doctor. And it like crawled around, and it got up in his nose, which I can only imagine how excruciating that would have been. But it crawled up in his nose. And then somehow, like from there, it like crawled down into his mouth. And then he was sitting there, he opened his mouth, and this like big black furry spider was in his mouth. And he was like, ah! So obviously it was killing him or whatever. And then there was someone else there. I think it was like a female, like a female nurse or something. I'm not sure. But she was there, and he was almost like possessed or something because he had this big black furry spider in his mouth, and it had already like attacked him. It crawled through his nose, got in his mouth, and I could tell it was in his mouth because he opened it up like this. He was like, ah, and there's this big black spider in it, and then it made him like crazy. And then he grabbed this big, like cylindrical glass, almost like a liquor bottle kind of, like, but it was clear. It was like a clear liquor bottle, and he was like, he was crazy, and he like threw it, and it flew into her mouth and like shattered and blew up, and she died. I'm pretty sure she was dead. She got killed in a melee with the doctor in the spider's mouth. Yeah, by throwing the bottle into her mouth at like a super high rate of speed. Like he was like super mad and like furious, and he had this black spider in his mouth. And he threw that clear bottle, and somehow she opened her mouth, and it flew in there and exploded, like a liquor bottle or something. And that was it. And then after that, I woke up. And granted, in my dream, it seemed a lot longer, so it was more of a night terror to me than it would be to you listening to the story. But I mean, this was no regular dream. I know this because of how terrified I was and how painful it was. But that little worm, like you would see like on an apple, like one of those little white worms, like just flicking around that's exactly what it looked like on my heel. But it was extremely painful. And when I finally got that thing off my heel and threw it down, that's when it turned into that furry spider, that black furry spider. And it just kept jumping on me over and over, and I kept fighting it and fighting it. And eventually, I don't know if I threw it out or whatever, but it jumped onto the doctor. And like I said, it crawled, and he was trying to get it off, and he couldn't. And then it ran up his nose, and then it got into his mouth, I guess, through that cavity system, whatever. And then he went crazy. When it was in his mouth, he went crazy, and that's when he picked up the clear bottle. It was like a liquor bottle or something, and like threw it, or almost like a Zephyr Hills bottle, I guess. It was kind of like a clear Zephyr Hills bottle. That's kind of what it looked like, I guess. And then he threw that as hard as he could, and she opened her mouth, and it went into her mouth and exploded and probably killed her, right? Because it was glass. And then I woke up, and I was terrified, and the pain, and it was awful. It was a night terror. It wasn't just some regular dream. It was like a vision. That was like a vision. And then after that, the weirdest thing was I woke up, and I felt calm. Like once the terror had abated, once that was gone, I felt almost like a calmness pour over me after that. And then that's when it all started coming to me. I'm like, wow. I was like, I just had that night terror, which I'm pretty sure was a vision. I feel like I should make a video about it because it was so specific. And somehow I knew that God wanted me to make the video. Like I said, I'm not going to be making a bunch of videos because of pride and vanity and stuff like that. And I don't want to tie up a lot of people's time. And I think God prefers that I do a lot of it through text, through photographs, through personal interaction, stuff like that. But I will, when I need to, I'll make a video. When I think I need to, and I thought I needed to this time. But this all happened after I'd got that personal sin out of my life, right? And like I said, we're talking about monks and nuns and stuff, and people who are celibate and shun the world and shun worldly possessions and possessions like luxury items, all this stuff. Like I'm trying to live like this. Like I want to be like an ascetic. I guess that's the right thing to say. Like asceticism. Like somehow try to tie that in with my life because I think that's what God wants because it keeps us from focusing on the little stupid, insignificant garbage that we focus on. Human stuff. We focus on human stuff and we're not focusing on our soul, the higher level things that actually matter, like obedience and love, obedience to God and loving all others to purify our soul so when we die we can go home. Like that's the main goal. That's what we should be worried about. But we're not. We're so worried about houses and cars and makeup and sex and all this other nonsense and food and water. We're worried about all this. So, but it all happened at the same time. Like I started getting into asceticism. I was looking at the monastery, right? Looking how monks live and how nuns live, right? Things like that, and how dedicated they are to God, how much they listen to God and they obey the commandments, and they live in a way that is nothing like this world. Like nuns and monks, as far as I know, and I'm sure it varies, they don't live like we live. We live like normal human animals, right? Running around just chasing pleasure. That's what we do. We run around chasing pleasure and sinning all over the place. But nuns and monks, they struggle, right? Like the struggle for virtue. They struggle and they put off things that would be pleasurable to themselves to be obedient to God. So instead of chasing their pleasure, they instead chase God through God's commandments, through living a holy life. So they struggle living here because this place sucks, as far as sin goes, and people who are sinful. There's a lot of sin here. It's this place is covered in it. So they struggle to live a holy life here, in this place. So I get it. It makes sense. So it's like I'm in that struggle now too. I'm struggling to get perfect, to be holy and perfect in a sinful world full of distractions, full of, video games and movies and strip clubs and liquor and drugs and murder and theft and everything else. Everything you would expect to see in like a hellish environment, you can find here. It's all available for you. 24 hours a day. In your face all the time. So that's why they call it a struggle. You're going to fight every day. You're going to fight your natural, unfortunately flawed human instincts, which like they say like, oh, follow your heart. Nope. You probably don't want to do that. Because your heart or certain parts of your body are going to want to do things and want to experience things that God has forbidden. And if we're disobedient and fallen in who we are, well, we'll be here. But when we get perfect and holy, we'll be in holy communion with God, actual God, top of the pyramid. But until then, we'll be here figuring things out. And hopefully we all get it right and get to be with God. But that's the story. That's what I was actually trying to get to, was the spider story. So, you can read into that however you want to. But like I said, it was that worm on my heel. And then the thing with the vending machines at the end of the road and all the poisonous snakes. It was like food and vending machines kind of. It was very strange. But it's weird because it ties back to, some personal sins that I was dealing with. And you look at like the monks and the nuns and stuff and like they're celibate. They don't have sex. Why? Well, I told you, it's not like God forbids sex, in a marriage. But I'm just telling you from personal experience, to God, like sex is icky. It's kind of gross. Even though we were designed this way, men and women work together. Yeah, we do. Like, I've got a girlfriend. We obviously don't do that stuff anymore. And it's great. We're just kind of like best friends, I guess. Really. I mean, we're just best friends, and we help each other, and we work together. I can't work because I'm called to do other things like this. So I'm busy reading and studying and learning from my environment and things like that. And then I relay that information to you to relay God's law, right? To the way home. And for Christianity. But that's my job. And then she goes to work. And unfortunately, she kind of lives like a worldly life. Like she has a job and she has to make money. But a lot of people have to do that. A lot of people, I guess, got to make money. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is right now. So I don't know. That goes back to like motivating people and jobs that need to get done and things like that. But it's just, it works for now. But, like I said, we got that strange thing, personal sin out of our lives. And now, I'm going to I'll definitely finish this up and try to live like an ascetic life. I think it's going to work out better for me. Clearly, there's a reason I'm drawn to the book and the material and what he's saying. Like, it totally makes sense to me. And I think that's probably how, we should be living to a degree. I mean, I don't think we're all going to be able to go sit on a mountaintop, for 4 or 6 months out of the year and just do nothing and just sit around and contemplate and be in communion with God. I don't think that's practical. Like, we do have to keep the lights on, so to speak, here. You need running water and sanitation and things like that. We got to take care of the people here. We have to love the people here. And to do that, you need people to do jobs, right? To get that work done. There's a lot of work that needs to be done here. Granted, when we pass on, hopefully we won't have to worry about it because we'll be perfect at that point. We can just go be in communion with God. But as long as there are people here, there's work here that needs to be done. And we need to take care of people. We need to love all others, not just our neighbors. That sounds nice, but it's pretty short-sighted, right? You only like your neighbors. You don't like anybody else. You don't like people across the world. You just like your neighbors, right? You want to be like the U.S. You want to sit around and cry about illegal immigration, even though without that, your economy would probably collapse and things that you enjoy eating and the fruits of their labor and things like that. You just don't want to do that. You don't want that labor, because I mean, trust me, there's a reason they leave the border open. You think they can't figure out how to close it? The border needs to be open. And God didn't make those borders. We did. Those aren't God's borders. God's borders are natural borders, probably like oceans and things like that. But even then, we're expected to love all others. It's not just neighbors. We're going to expand it, right? It's a New Testament. But we're loving all others. So we need to actually do that. And that type of love, the type of love that it's going to require to fix this place, is going to be sacrificial love. Because it's not just love to be nice. It's love, like, you're going to have to love people so much that it hurts. That it takes away from your time to do whatever entertainment you love doing. Time away from the video games or the movies or the sports or whatever it is, whatever your thing is. All right? It's going to require us to be completely obedient to God's commandments that were given to us that will fix this place. If all 8 billion of us follow the same rules at the same time, which would probably be a tough sell, but that's what we're shooting for. We'll see if it happens. Jesus couldn't get it done, when he was down here. He tried as hard as he could, but look at the limitations he had. He didn't have the internet. He didn't have meteorological data and satellites and GPS and all this stuff. So it should be a lot easier this time to get the information across. Now, even if you have the information, actually abiding by it is different. Like, having the information is great, but if you don't listen and apply it to your life, it means nothing. You can have the rule book all you want, but if you don't use the rules or apply them in your life, they're meaningless. And you're going to be the one sitting there, swiping that sin card over and over and getting penalized and sitting back going, oh man, this world sucks. The world's so unfair. There must not be a God because bad things keep happening to me. Well, maybe you should look at your life, and then maybe there's things that happened before that you don't remember. Who knows? Right? But trust me, things don't just accidentally happen here. Right? And a lot of it we bring on ourselves because we're disobedient children. If you want to know how God looks at us, that's it. He looks at us as children. We get puffed up with pride and we think, oh, I'm a king of this, or I'm the head of this, or I'm the supreme leader of that. No, to God, you're just a disobedient child who doesn't listen, doesn't follow the rules, gets in trouble, hurts themselves, and then sits around and cries about how the world isn't fair. And why would God make a place that's so unfair? It's so unfair. Why is it unfair? It's unfair because we don't listen. Because we're disobedient children. That's what we are to God. Please understand that part of it. And with disobedient children, you don't wipe them out. You don't kill them and start over. You work with them. And some kids are knuckleheads, and they just don't listen. Some kids get spanked. It happens because they just go wild and they do whatever they want. And if you let people do whatever they want, they're going to infect other people. So it's like you're letting a cancer spread, Is it metastasize? Is that what they call it? Like, you let people act however they want, and they metastasize, or they grow to other cells, right? It spreads. So you have to keep it under control. So everyone needs to listen all at the same time. I mean, if Jesus had, the internet and YouTube and everything, and all those miracles were documented and videotaped, and there was no question that they all happened, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation. Maybe not, right? Because everyone would have seen it and believed it. And everyone would have passed that on to their friends and their relatives, and they would have been disciples, right? Teaching other people about it, and we'd all be singing from the same hymn sheet, right? And if we were all singing from God's hymn sheet and acting the same way and living in accordance with the same rules, this wouldn't be a fallen world. This would be like an Eden, like a paradise. But we don't listen. And, as the Archbishop says here of Urki, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but it all stems from pride. We think, we act like we're gods. We want to be God. We don't want to listen to God because we want to be the gods. We want to make the rules because we're so special and we're so important. And the only way to break that is going to be with, Christian humility and love and obedience. And that's it. So I've explained the vision that I had and how I think that Christianity is absolutely the answer for it, because it's the only religion where God came to earth as Christ, not God, but as Christ, in a human form to relay the information to us. And it's up to us to listen and follow God's commandments so that we can live beautiful, holy lives and eventually live in communion with God for eternity. But for that to happen, we're going to have to do the work. We're going to have to struggle to be virtuous. It's not easy to live with God's commandments because they're so foreign to the place that we are currently. This worldly place is full of distractions and it is full of sin. It's kind of like a cesspit. But it doesn't mean, right? Like orchids. You can have beautiful things come out of a cesspit, like a muddy lake or whatever. You can have beautiful flowers, beautiful orchids, or whatever. Whatever those are. Those orchids? I think they are. But you can have beautiful things come out of dirty places. And that's what's going to have to happen with us. Because we're in a dirty place, and we're going to have to be that beautiful, pure flower that just pops out of it. So hopefully that happens. It will for some of us, the ones that listen. But that's it for now. So hopefully you've gotten something out of this message, and I hope that we all end up being pure, holy beings, and that eventually we get home to be with God, in communion with God, which is exactly what He wants and what our higher level self wants. Our higher level selves, whether we realize it or not, wants to go home, wants to go be with God. But we're so focused on lower level, almost animalistic urges that we never get to focus on the higher level stuff because we're too busy pleasing ourselves instead of pleasing God. So just remember, God loves us and wants to provide direction so that we can save ourselves. All right. Have a good day.